But today's meditation is about guilt. When we're living intentionally, one of the things that happens with the human ego that responds to a spoken or unspoken set of rules is guilt. And whether we are aware or not, our conditioning gives us a series of rules that applies to us and automatically to everybody we associate with, and we say we have standards, we have a quality. But also there are rules under that that applies to us personally, where occasionally we'd look at other people and say, oh, we'd never do that. Or we have rules that go with our conscience. The conscience says this is right or this is wrong. And then that conscience is associating with a set of rules, that is learned rules, learned behavior. And some of the time we might actually have an understanding of why the rule exists. While at other times, a lot of the rules are associated with expectations, other people's expectations of our behavior, and therefore a rule around how to meet that expectation. So we have guilt associated with our conditioning, our past experience, and all of those spoken and unspoken rules. Then we have guilt that comes from surviving. Now, a lot of people have this one, and very, very few people are actually aware, unless the death is in specifically traumatic conditions, that they have something called survivor's guilt. Somebody dies, and they feel guilty that they are still alive. The closer the association or the relationship, very often the deeper the guilt. But when there is a traumatic death, like a car accident, or if somebody is actually the cause of somebody's death in an accident, then we have a huge trauma around survivor's guilt, and it goes quite deep. Over and above that, we have, my God, for as many humans as there are different ways of feeling guilty. So some people feel guilty that they have, while others have not. Some people say, I have such a blessed life, and I feel guilty that my life seems so easy by comparison to other people's, and so they feel guilty about that. They feel guilty about the ease with which their lives happen. Some people feel guilty that they have children, while other people struggle to have children. So in the face of other people's experiences, instead of just counting our blessings and living them fully, people go into guilt. And then we have good old-fashioned traditional guilt around doing something that is criminally wrong. Now we know that there are laws, and the justice system gives us laws, so we know that that is criminally wrong. And then we have morality, living in cohesion and co-harmony with everybody else. So that gives us a system of what we know to be criminally wrong or not kosher. And then we have the spiritual laws. And I'm finding that people have a guilt about all of the other things, but they don't have a guilt about the spiritual laws, which is exactly as it should be, because the spiritual laws don't exist to create guilt. Guilt comes from judgment of self against all of those spoken and unspoken laws. So when I talk to my guides about this, I say, why do we feel guilty? And they say, because you know you did something wrong. And you know you did something wrong in terms of those spoken or unspoken rules. All of those effects of conditioning inside of you tell you what is right for you. And when you go against that, you feel guilty. If you do something awful to somebody, even if they deserve it, you'll feel bad. So in our society, that says you're a decent human being. But that feeling of guilt is so wasted, because it's a poison, actually. It's a poison that you put in your system, and you stress your body out with it. You stress your cellular memory out with it, and it goes right there next to fear and resentment and anxiety for feeling guilty. And of course, we live in a world where people want to hold each other accountable, and they play the blame game. So you did this, and therefore that happened. and we encourage guilt. Right? If you don't feel guilty, then you're now creating a bigger problem. You're deepening the crime, actually, because if you shown or you demonstrate that you are feeling guilty, then the other person is supposed to be appeased by your demonstration of guilt. And this makes no sense to me. In the spiritual world, it makes no sense to me, because how can somebody going into distress, into discomfort in themselves, make somebody else feel better? It's just completely illogical. So what happens then is that the other person should feel guilty that they're taking pleasure or feeling better because you're in distress. Which is again spiritually illogical and logically, rationally illogical. How can two pains make a healing system? It can't. What we can do, instead of going into guilt, is make amends. So here's guilt that says I did something wrong. And the next step from guilt is remorse. Now remorse is a very different thing from guilt, because guilt says I did something wrong and I'll feel guilty, but that's inside of me. That's just about me. I feel guilty, and I will actually pat myself on the back that I'm feeling guilty because my conscience says I did something bad. So now that makes me a fairly decent sort of person because I'm feeling guilty about doing something bad. Remorse says I did something bad that is impacting on something else. It's impacting on someone else. It's creating an experience that connects me to someone, and that the connection between us must be addressed. So remorse has an element of sadness. It has an element of what we call sorrow that goes with it to say, I recognize, I validate the impact on somebody else. And remorse takes us that step forward into doing something to make amends instead of wallowing in guilt. Now, most of the people I talk to as clients, all of whom carry this guilt around like a big burden, and I say, so what are you going to do about it? And their first response is, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. And then I say, but now you're guilty of being lazy about it. Now you're guilty of glamorizing yourself, this ego system that says, oh, I feel so bad. You know, I feel so bad, and because I feel so bad, I feel better. It makes no sense to me at all. That everybody suddenly feels like they're nicer people because they're feeling better about being guilty. And there is no making amends. There is no remorse. It doesn't go to the next level of them where there is a recognition of impacting on someone else or something else or on an entire consciousness or system. Which is why our society is set up, so that somebody outside of you has to say, you are guilty and you need to be punished. The system goes wrong, however, because the punishment is never about making amends to the party that's been damaged or hurt. Right? And actually what we've done is, where we do have that system of making amends, it's about paying in money, damages. That's what people do. They pay compensation, damages, because of this impact. But it doesn't call for remorse. It doesn't call for compassion. It doesn't call for accountability within self in connectedness to another. I remember my guide saying to me, the feeling of guilt is exactly like standing at the toilet, flushing 200 Rand notes every 2 minutes. Once it's full, you flush another one and you flush another one. And if you ever did that, you would say, that's a waste. It's wasted energy. It doesn't serve anyone, least of all you or the party that you've impacted on. So the trick with guilt is, if you go into guilt about something, to stop immediately and see, how can I make amends for this impact? And when we do that, two things become possible. One, we recognize that we're not God and we're not actually having the kind of impact that the brain is telling us we have. Right? Because a lot of people go into guilt by overthinking something. We go into extreme guilt by overthinking and overanalyzing and making the drama bigger in our heads than it is in actuality. The second thing that happens is that we are forced to now look at something from somebody else's point of view, which deepens the remorse and eases the guilt. Because the minute you start to see something from somebody else's point of view, how they might be experiencing something, you shift into a learning position as opposed to a decided position. So guilt is a stagnating energy. It's not an uplifting, empowering, learning curve. It simply forces us to stagnate. I feel guilty. Now what? I've never found a solution to it. Because the nature of guilt itself is that it's about me. It's completely ego-based. I feel guilty, so I'm going to wallow in that emotional input. But I've never ever connected it. I can say I feel guilty about and tell the story. I can feel guilty about that or that or that, but it sits here with self. And when I look at guilt, I think, okay, this is one of those emotions that comes from being self-absorbed. I did something wrong, I feel guilty, and everything else is over there. But if I feel bad enough, maybe I'll do something about it and shift into a space of remorse. Because remorse has compassion. It has a desire and a yearning to make things right, either with the parties involved or atonement in some other way, and therefore requires humility, the willingness to be vulnerable and to hand over the power to somebody else. So saying, I'm so sorry I hurt you. How can I make amends? Gives somebody else the power to decide. Isn't that so? And very, very few people have the power to apologize that way, to take the risk of being vulnerable enough. But everybody has the capacity to play a mind game, to get in their heads and get guilty. Except maybe for the people who actually do dastardly things and have a really good rationalization for it. So they go to court and plead not guilty. Huh? Well, there's that. Mental imbalances and mental illnesses. But there are those people who are able to rationalize their behaviors so well that they escape guilt completely. They escape remorse completely. There's such a huge ego game in place that they don't even realize that there is an impact. So I suppose in that system we can say, well, it's a good thing somebody feels guilty. But we can't stagnate in guilt. We can't get stuck there and wallow in it because it's a poison to self and it's a poison to everybody else. It's a poison to the relating. When we're feeling guilty about something and it becomes so burdensome, we can't actually relate to other people. I've had several people who are widows or widowers, and they feel so guilty about still being alive. They feel guilty about dating somebody new. They feel guilty about having fun. And so they start to die too, or to put themselves in a position where it is necessary to die in order to say, I am living without you. So basically I'm going through the motions until I die as well, and then we'll be still in partnership together. And that also makes no sense to me, because souls, before they are born, choose when they are going to die. They choose circumstances of death. They choose timing. And very often partners agree before they are born that they're going to be together, and that one has got to predecease the other if they don't arrange to leave together. And very few people arrange to leave together because they have children. Somebody has to stay and take care of the children. So very often souls take turns to leave. And of course we forget all of that and we play the ego game here, and it is an ego game. It's not an ego game as in self-aggrandizement, but it's an ego game as in it's based in the duality system of judgment and incoherence, or a lack of harmony with spiritual law. And that's where spiritual law becomes more important, becomes more dominant in terms of managing self and how I then relate to everything else. If guilt ties a knot in my relationship with others, then I need to unravel the knot with compassion and shift it into remorse and the possibility of making amends. Now we know we can't always make amends to the people involved. Very rarely, actually, is there an opportunity to work specifically with that person when it's a bigger event. So sometimes we have to make amends in other ways. We have to be nicer to other people. We have to be kinder. We have to take that lesson inside and shift the behavior that created the guilt in the first place. Then we know that there is remorse. Then we know that there is a shifting in the thinking and the feeling and the actual behavior that doesn't lead to more guilt. Now we know people who repeat patterns of behaviors, right? That's what they do. Over and over and over again.
Guilty.
And they go into guilt, and they go into guilt, and they go into guilt. So they have an accumulation of guilt around the same behavior. And you think, okay, there's your stagnation. There's your wallowing. Now, I was saying earlier, my good friend Fatima feels guilty if she goes into a shop to look at things and she doesn't buy anything. And her guilt comes from a feeling of obligation. You know, there is an obligation to purchase something in the shop as if you stood there and that man paid rent for you to stand in his shop. It's a weird sort of thought, but a lot of people have that. Some people will bring a bottle of wine to dinner because they feel, now, if I come here and I eat your food and I go away and I don't bring wine or I don't bring cake or whatever, then I'm guilty of not contributing. Even if they're told, please don't bring anything at all. Because inside all of those spoken and unspoken rules are determining behavior. And we've all learned it's always nice to bring your host or hostess something, right? Yeah, it's the polite thing to do. It's the courteous thing to do. Even if you really don't feel like it, even if you've run out of time, even if you don't drink wine, you bring it anyway. Because you feel guilty if you didn't. And then of course we have comparative guilt, where I compare myself to others and I'm not as successful, I'm not as beautiful, I'm not as good. You know, we all are the same age and yet we're doing different things in our lives, haven't accomplished as much as those people have. So now I'm guilty of not doing as much, being as much, accomplishing as much. I'm guilty of not being enough on somebody else's scale. And that is a guilt that kills us, because it is a self-betraying guilt that says, I didn't do what other people are doing, as opposed to, according to spiritual law, I'm being me. Now, spiritual law says you have to be true to yourself. And ego-based law says I am in competition and comparison with everything else. I have to do it that way. So if I do it my way, I am supposed to feel guilty about not doing it that way, or in those stages, according to that particular ladder that everybody seems to be climbing. I don't understand this illogical, rational, ego-based thinking anymore. So I would very much like to eradicate guilt. I mean, Paddy died and I don't feel guilty that I'm alive. I feel guilty that I had to kill her, but I didn't really kill her, so I can get past that one. But I don't feel guilty that I'm alive. And I don't think I should live life less because she's dead. I think all of my exes should live life less because, you know, they're exes. But that's called karma. Everybody gets caught up. And of course we get irritated with people when they don't feel guilty, because we want some evidence that they are aware of doing something wrong. Or we want their agreement. We want them to say, yes, I did something wrong. We want them to agree with us, as if then we are validated in our pain and in our wound. And that's why we get into the pattern of expressing guilt or demonstrating guilt because we want somebody else to think that their wound or pain inflicted by us is now validated. But the truth is that inside, everybody knows. We all know. We know when we've done something that's hurting somebody else. We know when the not doing even is hurting somebody else. And that's actually where we need to stop. That's where we need to catch ourselves and eradicate all of those ego-based behaviors that create guilt in the first place. It is only an ego-based behavior that will lead to an ego-based emotion. When we truly do not intend, when we are truly aware and there is no intention whatsoever of hurting someone, we go past guilt and straight into remorse, because that is the soul behavior. The soul says, oh my God, this is actually what I intended. I am so sorry that it had that effect. And there's no guilt. There's no sitting there and wallowing and thinking, oh my God, I did this, and agitating about it, and then rationalizing it and burdening oneself. There's an immediate, instantaneous acknowledgement and recognition that says, I truly didn't intend that.
Like stepping on the dog.
Like stepping on the dog, exactly. And it's so instinctive, you do it straight away. And there's remorse in that. The feeling is I'm seeing somebody's wound and I'm even making amends, because now I'm rubbing the dog's bum and doing all sorts of things to love her and make sure that she feels better, because we can't take away the pain that is past. But we can move somebody from that moment of wounding into a space of peace, into a space of harmony, into a space of feeling okay even. We can do that. And making that effort or investing energy in that is an act of remorse. Remorse doesn't come from fear, and it doesn't come from comparison, and it doesn't come from judgment. It comes from acknowledgement. It comes from awareness. So guilt, wasted energy, the world is spending a fortune on it, and the people who should actually be moving into guilt or remorse are not doing it. So all of the people who have guilt and can actually set it down, put it aside in order to live fully and bring remorse to the table and begin a pattern, living intentionally of shifting and changing behaviors, so that we know before we create a wound, we become aware of the possibility of wounding. So we preempt the whole drama of guilt itself. Only the ego is unaware enough to do something with a rationalization and then be guilty later. It's called quitting while you're ahead.
What happens if you go through the remorse and you try and make amends and the person refuses to accept your attempt at making amends?
See, now that leads to the subject of forgiveness. Right? Because I'm making amends. The remorse is here. It's got nothing to do with the other person actually. And the remorse says inside out, I have awareness. I am acknowledging something. And I am making amends because there is a shift inside. I'm learning from the behavior. I'm seeing something that needs to be set straight. And even as I'm doing it for someone, or sending that energy, or speaking, communicating it in some way, whether the other person is receptive or not is up to them. We have no control over that. I mean, the dog might turn around and bite you, right? Because you inadvertently hurt it, but I've never seen dogs do that, because they're so forgiving. Yeah? So whether the other person is willing to forgive or not, whether the other person is latching on to the remorse as a way of beating you up with it, because people do that, is theirs. So now they're putting their behavior in a space where they need to feel guilty or they need to feel remorse. An unwillingness to accept remorse means they're coming from their ego space and playing a power game. And it usually turns into a grand manipulation. So we don't bother with that. We go, okay, I am making amends. Who am I making amends for, firstly? For self. Because I want to come from the soul self. I want to do the right thing. And when I do the right thing, I create peace of mind here. I will no longer be agitating about this. I'll know that I have tried, And in my trying, in my doing, in my becoming, I have succeeded. The success of this, the value of this does not depend on how the other person receives it. It depends entirely on the sincerity with which we become remorseful and bring amends to the table. And if you don't receive it, well, you know, you're just one ego in an entire universe of souls that is receiving it. So although I focus it here, the fact is that the rest of the universe is getting it, including my higher self, all of my guides, all of my angels. Well, you pale into insignificance now. But here's the other thing. We can't always do remorse and making amends with the actual person. Sometimes people are just difficult like that. So it's okay to sit quietly. And sometimes we do what we call a cutting cords meditation, where we direct light energy into the connection between you. Because remember, remorse is based on the acknowledgement of a connection and a damaging of the connection. So we bring light energy to that connection and we clear from our side at least and put light into that connectedness just by focusing on that person, bringing blessings into it, bringing healing into it, and ensuring that the flow from self to others is clear. So actually the act of remorse or the actions around remorse are about clearing the poisons from self and clearing connectedness with others and bringing compassion to it. And when we do that, it's an act of self-forgiveness, which immediately shifts you out of dependency on the other person's forgiveness. Now, as always, everything depends on how we do it. The sincerity, the integrity, the soul-based way of being determines that. If we're coming from ego arrogance, oh, well, you know what, I tried to make amends and you didn't receive it, so the hell with you. Oh, well, now we have something else to feel guilty about. You know, it just spirals into more ego-based wrongdoing. Out of integrity with self, out of integrity with soul, and so reaction-based, actually, that it is not a wholehearted response to the behaviors, your own or somebody else's. So guilt is a reaction. Remorse is a response to your own behavior and a rectifying of self, actually. Because that person may move on, but you have shifted the behavior within yourself. And that's actually where we're making amends. We are mending self. We are taking self forward.
You're less likely to do it again.
Absolutely, hopefully. Yeah. Absolutely. Also, so many of our behaviors that are so conditioned require this wrongdoing for us to have the awareness that it actually hurts. It hurts self and it hurts others. And when we start rectifying it and creating the peace of mind that goes with it, we're also creating what we call a karmic effect. Because all of our deeds sit within ourselves. And that act of making amends clears all of the negative stuff and opens us up to our own positivity, our own wisdom, our own feeling good about self. Which, thankfully, we live in a matrix of intelligence, feeds itself into value of self. Then we can say, I really am a decent-hearted human being. I actually like myself. I value this person, and whether you value it or not is okay. I have good reason, because the brain always needs reason, to value myself. When we're sitting in guilt, there is no valuing self available. Self-esteem, self-respect, all of those things get damaged because now we've done something bad. And when we've done something bad, we are bad. Isn't that what we learned? When you've done something bad, it's because you are bad. You know, like a rotten apple. Yeah, so now you're just rotten and going to make everything else rotten. Everything else that you touch is going to be rotten. And then there's that spiraling down into never ever healing out of one bad deed or even a series of bad deeds. Now, this entire understanding of guilt and remorse and compassion and forgiveness, they've tried using it in rehabilitation of prisoners. And some spaces have had such fabulous results because the system of punishment is in fact compassionate. Amazingly enough for me, most of those countries still have the death penalty. They still have the death penalty. And it doesn't work with an eye for an eye. I mean, those are the countries that say there are some crimes that are so heinous, you actually have to die for them. We can't keep you in society. We can't allow you to be a part of a system and be taken care of in that system. And then there are other spaces where they'll say, we see your potential. And so very often, the act of remorse becomes the act of rehabilitation. But if it's sitting in ego stuff, and it's sitting in guilt, and it's sitting in rationalization, then any hope for rehabilitation is lost. So every person who moves out of guilt and into remorse, moves into the awareness of now doing the right thing, even with hindsight, putting things right, setting things straight, is in fact rehabilitating self, educating self, creating more and more awareness of what I don't want to be doing with myself and where I don't want to be coming. And the more people know what they don't want, the easier it is to realize what they do want, what they don't want to be, and what they do want to be. That other party that you have wronged may come to the party, may join in, may enjoy and also be learning, but that is a choice that that party has. And in fact, it becomes a third party, because this is about you, yourself, and you. Actually, then it becomes a fourth party. See how distant it becomes. But if we depended on everybody outside of us to do the forgiving, then we'd be getting stuck in their game. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so how do we meditate on guilt? Let's try it. So let's take a deep breath in, get present and get grounded. And in keeping with last week's meditation, let us open both the base chakra, connecting us to the earth, and the crown chakra, connecting us to spirit. The base chakra grounding the human doing self with the awareness that gravity is always acting upon the physical body and that the healing energy of the earth is always acting on the auric field. And when we set a clear intention to open the crown chakra to all spirit, to connectedness with all other souls, we must have the awareness that the universe, as spirit, as nature, as co-creative intelligence, is always acting upon the human doing as it is present on the physical plane and on the auric field as it is present in this incarnated beingness. So as you're sitting there quietly, breathing consciously, be aware of yourself as an energy system and a physical body that has both the heavens and the earth active upon it. That I, the eternal self, am fully present. And the awareness of yourself as an energy being, and that energy is in fact information. So there in your mind's eye, imagine for a moment that all of the electrical currents running through your physical body is carrying information from your brain to your toes, from your brain to every organ in your body. And as you bring your awareness to that, you might actually feel that electrical energy become heightened, simply with awareness, simply with validation. And as that awareness heightens, There might be a sensation under your skin, a slight buzzing in your body, just a general awakening of the consciousness to this electrical system that is constantly, consistently at work on your behalf, keeping you connected to the heavens and keeping you connected to the earth, keeping you connected to yourself inside out and outside in. Sending data, information, voluntary and involuntary, to every part of your physical body and every part of your energy body. And that all of that data informs how you do what you do. That this data determines the attitudes, the preferences, the conditioning, the unconscious reactions, and even the decision-making process that you experience in your daily life, in your practical doing and being every day. So as you're sitting there quietly, connected to the heavens, connected to the earth, breathing and focusing on this entire electromagnetic field, on the electrical energy of you that is now awake and available to you in meditation, take a moment to feel it, to focus in on it, and commit it to memory, clear intention, that all of my cells and my skin and even the tip of my nose must record this feeling of being awake, aware, alert as an electromagnetic field, while the body and mind are quiet, still, present, observing. While the body and mind are working with the electromagnetic field to become more conscious, more awake, more present energetically. And as you stay with that feeling, you may experience particular centers, chakras, aligned with your physical body, responding. You may have an involuntary reaction in any one of those chakras, a gentle throbbing, maybe even pain. Simply allow it. Observe it. Let it be what it is. And let the information coming up from those sensations in your physical body filter through into the intuitive knowing of your energy field. Let the electrical currents running through you carry the information as both thoughts and non-thoughts, or unconscious thoughts, or subconscious thoughts. Just let the entire system be what it is, naturally, while you observe it. 72,000 nadis, 72,000 electrical currents that connect to you in an entire matrix of intelligence. All of those have the capacity to be awake, mindful, conscious, and to carry information into the subconscious and unconscious self and challenge, shift, transform, and change old, conditioned thoughts and subsequent behaviors. So keep your attention on the electrical system that you are and allow it to flow. Keep your awareness on this natural, innate system working and bringing more and more sensation to your physical body as a reminder that you are alive. Stimulating, animating, and activating this electrical system by bringing your awareness to it gives your entire energy system and your physical body the opportunity to show you, to give you the sensation and the feeling and the emotions associated with being alive. Not just breathing and living, but being alive. That even in the context of ultimate death of the physical body, I am alive. And the more you maintain the awareness, the more you hold your focus and your breathing in this space with your electrical energy, the higher the vibration of its flow, of its individual sparks, the higher the vibration of 72,000 nadas working in harmony, following the natural patterns of your physical body as it is connected to your energy body through the chakras, through all of the meridians that keep all of the flow of the lymph drainage system, the arteries and the veins connected, flowing. So just stay with it. Breathe gently and consciously. Breathe with the awareness of the life force flowing into all of those meridians, of the life force enhancing 72,000 nadas, awakening long dead sparks of energy, awakening lost connections, awakening electrical currents that may have fallen flat. Electrical currents that may be besieged by a congested emotional body or an overactive mental body. or a very fatigued physical body. Breathe into the lines of latitude and longitude as they exist in your energy field and contain you. Just breathe consciously with clear intention to consistently activate all of the electrical currents of self. And the more active and more alive the energy system and the physical body are, the easier it is to manage the wounds, the pain, the emotional bundle called guilt. So here in this awake, alive, alert state, while being quiet and present with yourself, go deeper within yourself to that bundle called guilt. Feel where in your physical body it is lodged. And it may be guilt about a story you have never told. That is your secret, that you have burdened yourself with for aeons, or what feels like aeons. It may be a daily drama, an unchanged behavior that creates the same guilt over and over and over again, and burdens you with toxic energy. It may be a periodic guilt, something you experience only in connectedness with a specific person or a specific interaction. The bundle of guilt may in fact be a combination of all of the above. A variety of circumstances and situations and experiences and people and interactions that sit inside of you and burden you, deaden you, weighten you. Or weight on you. That's right. And there where you're acknowledging it, begin to unravel it. How much of the guilt exists because you are told to feel guilty, or you are required to feel guilty, or expected to feel guilty. And there in your mind's eye, as if you are brushing away cobwebs, dust it off the bundle. Let us go deeper to the essence of you. To all of the ways in which you judge the world, and therefore yourself. All of the ways in which you create guilt for others, and therefore self. All of the ways in which you choose to hold the world accountable for its behavior and desiring change of others. With an unwillingness to change self. These are all the ego bases of guilt. And then you may go even deeper to actual wrongdoing, the creation of a wound in a connection or interaction or another being. And that's the one that wounds you. So make it conscious, bring it to the fore. And surround it with love. Just love. Not a person, not a thing, not an experience. Just love, unconnected to anything, but as a feeling that resides there within you, in your electromagnetic field, in the 72,000 nadis carrying information and data, there is love. Surround it with love. Uplift it from guilt to remorse with love. Uplift it from weightedness and waiting on you to action, to awareness, to being alive within you. And even as you do that, you may have a sense, a feeling, a knowing of how you may make amends, how you may set yourself straight, how you may shift direction. And even if it is an old guilt, and your behaviors have already changed, use this as an opportunity to forgive yourself, to bring light into the dead space of guilt, to awaken this part of you that it may live as fully as the rest of you. Create the opportunity for all 72,000 nadis to be running and flowing and skipping joyfully. In you, the energy system, and within you, the physical body. And you may feel, as you do this work, that your physical body responds, that your energy body responds, that it engages in an energetic dialogue, shifts and changes in temperature, shifts and changes in sensation. You may even experience a specific flow stopping, becoming more quiet, more still, almost numb, and then reawakening, shifting and flowing in a different direction. So take a moment to let your body know that this meditation for this moment is about guilt. But as it gives you a response, as it shows you that it hears you, feels you, and responds to the intentions you bring to it, you will be empowered and enabled to use the same technique on any other deadening, poisoning emotion, any other weighting you down, burdening you, ego-based system of thinking and emoting. So feel the dialogue with your body. Engage with it. And show your body that you are willing, that you are receptive of all guilt being removed, surrendered at a cellular level, at an organ level, at a system level. That we have moved into making amends with love, with compassion, with receptivity. Tell your body that you are willing to support it, willing to nourish it and nurtures it as it surrenders, as it rescinds all of the deadening, waiting on you emotions. And that you will happily give it the opportunity to lighten up in accordance with your energy body and the fireworks of 72,000 nadis, bringing new life force energy into every cell, every chakra, and every aspect of your auric field, all 12 bodies. And don't forget to thank your body for being willing to carry the burdens of your ego for so long. Being willing to hold it until you are willing to let it go. Even willing to endure it. Don't forget to thank your body for being such a wonderful vehicle this lifetime, and make a commitment to remaining aware of what ego-based emotions you may create for yourself in the next moment and the next moment. And now very gently bring all of your awareness back to just breathing consciously, being grounded, remaining connected to the heavens, keeping as many of the 72,000 nadis flowing as possible. And then bring yourself back to the here and now.